Hey, what's going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and today I'm going to be bringing you this tutorial right here showing you how to modify your Trinity Xbox 360 console to take it from a stock system to a dual NAND system with a retail side and a exploited RGH side to do whatever you want to. Now, there's going to be a few disclaimers here I'll have. First of all, please watch the video in its entirety if you're planning on doing this. That way, I'm going to have a parts list available showing you what all you'll need, but I don't want to say, get this and get that, and then you might have been thrown off because you're halfway through the tutorial and you realize you don't have something you need to complete the install. The second thing is going to be huge, absolutely huge thank you and shout out to the mod shop. I've spoken with the guy there, Element, and he's a really great guy. He's the founder of the place, the installer, modder, all that other fun stuff, and he actually provided the hardware that you're seeing right here. He provided me with the stock console, the Viper Dual NAND chip, and the glitch chip, as well as a few other things such as wiring, debug LED lights, and a pin header to program this right here. So he provided this, and if it was not for him, this tutorial would not have been possible. It was definitely an awesome move on his part, and all he wanted in return was this tutorial right here. So mod shop, thank you very much. On top of that, of course, it is promotion for his shop as well. So if you're interested, if this tutorial is just too much for you, that's totally fine. You can go ahead and check out his site. It will be down below in the description, and you can go ahead and get the parts that you'll need there, or you can send in your console to him to get it modified, or you can purchase a pre-modded system. All you have to do is speak to him, and that's about it. But anyways, again, huge shout out to that. Really very much appreciate it, and I'm sure the people who are using this tutorial as an informative guide are appreciative of it as well. Finally, if you are the type of person who you want to get an RGH to mod games online, use an Xbox Live Stealth service and such, I will say I won't be able to assist with that. I don't personally support it. However, I will tell you that if you're going to be doing an install like this, I actually would not recommend this type of console. You could follow the first part of this guide, which is going to show you all how to get the S-RGH exploit working on here. However, for the second part, we're going to be doing a dual NAND system. And the issue with that comes in that you're going to run into the point where if you get banned on your RGH side, it's also going to ban your retail side. And you can unban your RGH side, but you can't unban your retail side, so at that point, it's completely useless having a dual NAND system. You might as well just go with a single NAND system if that's all you're planning on doing. This setup right here is more specifically if you're the type of person where you want to go online with the retail side, but you want to keep the RGH side offline. And if that is it, that is perfect for you. However, if all you're wanting to do is go online with an RGH, you can follow the first part of this tutorial, but the second part where you do the dual NAND thing, you don't need to dual NAND. But this will show you how to do the S-RGH right here. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, you're going to need your Xbox 360 Trinity console taken apart down to the motherboard right here. You're going to go ahead and need the necessary things for the glitch chip to get this all installed. You're also going to need, of course, your Viper Dual NAND if you're choosing to do that. And you're going to need a NAND programmer. I'm using a NAND X, but you could use a JR programmer. And those are the only two I've used. I know there's the Squirts and there's a few others, but I'm going to be using a NAND X for this tutorial. Any type of pictures, guides that are utilized, and downloads, for example, for JRunner and a few other things, I'm going to have linked down below in the description. However, one prerequisite I would recommend before you take this thing apart is to actually update your system to the latest firmware that you can. So I myself, for example, the link that I'm going to have down below in the description, at least at this moment in time, is for a JRunner build, which uses dashboard 17511. I've actually already updated this console to 17511, so it's going to make the process a little bit easier, and for sure everything will work on there. But go ahead and update it to that, and then you'll be able to continue the exploit here. So now that we assume the console is ready and stripped down all that stuff, what we need to do is we need to solder in our NAND wires to read the NAND. So there's going to be points that I'm going to have up on screen so you specifically know which wires to solder. And I have my NAND X wires right here, and they are all color-coded. So for example, if there's a point that is labeled as yellow, you solder the yellow wire to it, just like the same with green or brown or whatever it is. But there's 7 wires we have to solder. So we're going to be soldering them right here where it says J2C1, and we're going to be soldering them right here where it says J2C3. So first off, what I'm going to do is take a Q-tip, dab it in isopropyl alcohol, and clean up these 2 points very well, because you want to make sure you have a nice clean surface to work with. And then at that point, once you feel like they're cleaned up well enough, you can now go ahead and take some type of flux, which is highly, highly recommended. I would almost call it a requirement. Really, I might as well just say it's a requirement here. but I'm going to take a little bit of flux, and it's kind of this like gunky looking stuff right here, and you just want to go ahead, lather it on like so. If you're worried about using too much, you don't need to worry about that. There's really not a time where you can use too much flux. In fact, it would be better to use too much flux than not enough, because this is going to just make it much easier to solder onto. And now that you have all those points soldered up, or tinned up, right? And now that you have all these points fluxed up right here, I'm just going to do the entire area. You now want to go ahead and start tinning all the points. So I'm going to be showing you that right here, and I'll just show you 1 or 2 points and I'll fast forward the video because it's going to be the same thing on all of these. But for all the points we're going to be hitting, we want to tin each of those with a little bit of solder to prepare them for the wires. So at this point, if my voice sounds a little bit obstructed, it's because I'm wearing a mask for this. But what I'm going to do is you're just going to go ahead, take your soldering iron, make sure it's clean. And for the tinning process, we just need to take a little bit of solder, like so, and we need to tin it to each of these points right here. So as you can see, a little bit of it can transfer over, but what you can also do, it's not really good to do it in that method. You might as well just go ahead, heat it up, solder a little bit to that, and there you go, you have a nice shiny area. But even if it becomes not as shiny, like so, once it dries up, you at least have the solder right there. So I'm going to show you 2 points right here. And as you can see, those have been tinned up pretty well. So now I'm going to do the other 5 points, but you just want to do the same thing on all those other points. For this yellow point right here, you might have to stay on this one a little bit longer, and it might give you some issues, but trust me, you can still solder to it. So now that you have all 7 of those points completed, we're now going to take our wires that you should get with your NAND programmer for the 360. I'm going to have them right here, and all we're going to do is match up the colors that are on these cables to the diagram that we have shown. Now that you have all of your wires soldered in, you want to go ahead and check them as well too. What I do is I wiggle them each a tiny bit, and if any of them wiggles just a little bit too much, kind of like my black one right here, I'm a bit uncomfortable with that, just go ahead and re-solder it so you make sure you get a nice, good, strong connection on it. And also make sure that none of them are bridged or touching all together, because we want everything to read and write correctly. Once all that's completed, I'm going to turn off my soldering iron for now, and what we need to do is we need to hook up the Xbox 360 to power. Just plug a power supply into it. Do not turn the console on, just turn on the power supply, and we're going to hook this up to our NAND programmer, and then we're going to read over the NAND using JRunner. Now, if you get any errors during the process, the first thing you should do is make sure your console is getting properly powered, but then the second thing is make sure your wiring is proper. Most of the time, if you have an error while you're reading or writing your NAND, it is most likely due to the fact that your wiring is messed up somewhere. So if you have to redo your wiring, so be it, but just make sure that everything is proper. But we're going to get to test it out right here. So once you get over to your computer, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need the JRunner V3 beta with the updated files, and you're also going to need the S-RGH V2 timing files. I'm going to go ahead, grab both of these, right click, and extract each of them in here. Once you have both these extracted, first go into JRunner, and right click the JRunner exe, and we want to open this as administrator. If you don't do this, you might have a few issues, so just make sure you run it as administrator. Now once JRunner pops up, as you can see, I have my NANDX hooked up right here, and it should say NANDX or whatever programmer you are using. Now if you're not having that come up, or if you're having issues with your driver install, I'm going to have a video linked that will also show you how to install drivers on Windows 8, 8.1, and Windows 10. Most notably Windows 10 though. So first off, I'm going to go over to the motherboard under XE build, double click this, and we're going to use Trinity because we are going to be selecting a Trinity. I'm going to turn this down to 2 reads because we really don't need to do 4 NAND reads, and then you want to click read NAND. Now as you can see, this is going to come up. It's going to start reading your NAND. If this is working, then congratulations, your soldering seems to be on point, so we're just going to wait here for a few minutes to get our 2 NAND dumps. Now, as you can see, we have both our NAND dumps completed. Each one takes about 2 minutes, and then it takes a few seconds to verify that they are the same. So as you can see, you have your information right here. I've updated it from 17502 to 17511 before we started this. I could check the KV info, there's nothing on there yet, and there are no bad blocks, so this is ideally what your console should be looking like when you dump it. Now we're going going to need to do a few things. First off, very first thing you should do is make a backup of this. You see, what's going to happen is we're first going to glitch the console, and then later on at the end of this tutorial, we're actually going to write this back to the console itself. So we want to make sure we have this NAND dump properly here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab from this path right here, copy, go over to my Windows Explorer, paste it right there, and as you can see, there's NAND dump 1, NAND dump 2, and the checksum file. I'm going to copy out both of these, and I'm going to go back over to my main folder, go over here, create a new folder, and I'll go ahead and call this one Viper Trinity install, and just copy those two files right there. So that way we can ensure that we have a backup of our original NAND dumps somewhere else in case JRunner goes berserk on us. Now that that is complete, we have both of them. I could also do another NAND compare just to make sure everything is fine. The NANDs are the same. Now we're going to go ahead and create and write the ECC file. So first off, you need to make sure your motherboard version is proper. This needs to be selected. It's glitch 2. It can't be any other image. This has to be a glitch 2 image. So we're going to hit create ECC. It's created that. And now we're going to hit write ECC. And this is why having that backup is so important, because now we are flashing an ECC file directly to the console. So now, as you can see, a few seconds later, it is completed. So we are now going to also program our glitch chip as well too, which I will show you how to do that while we're here. So right here, as you can see, we have our NANDX programmer, we have the CoolRunner programming wire, and we also have our glitch chip along with this pin header right here. Now what you could do is you could solder this pin header directly in here, but we want to do a easy solderless job. So ModShop, or Element from there, he actually gave me a really nice tip. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take our pin header, which you can get these pretty much anywhere if you look for them, but it is just a simple 6-pin header. We're going to plug it directly in here. So now we have that going, and we want to make sure we are pointing at our smooth side. So we have the smooth side, and then we have this side that has some parts exposed. Now this needs to be facing inwards on the chip. So what I'm going to do is make sure you have our chip right here. We're going to put the holes in like so. A bit hard to do on camera, but as you can see, we have that. And now when we go to program, what we could do is apply a little bit of pressure so the contacts are touching. Again, make sure the smooth side is facing inwards on the chip. You apply a little bit of pressure, and then we are going to do that while we are programming the chip. And once the file is written, we can then unplug it, and that's about it. So that is how we're going to be doing it solderless. Now that we have that set up, go ahead and hook up your NANDX, take this, plug it into the glitch chip, and then let's go ahead and program it. So once you have your NANDX connected along with the X360ACE V3 and it is plugged in, what should happen is when you do this, when you connect it in, there should be a red indicator light that is coming on when you have the proper connection on the ACE chip. If you have that red light, that means you have power and you're good to go. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go over to Advanced, Custom NAND CR Functions. We're going to select XSVF, go to the file name right here, and click the ellipse. Now the ModShop has recommended right here we go into the S-RGH V2 timing files, go to Trinity, Best Timings, Pack 1 Best, XSVF, and go down to RGH2 try SUDU50_1. He recommended starting out with this, so we're going to go ahead and give this one a shot. Now, you might have some better luck with other timings, but for the first time here, we're going to go ahead and give this one a shot because this is the recommended one. Once you have it loaded up right there, as you can see, that is the file I have selected, press run, and it's now going to go ahead and do that. As you can see, input, output, done. So when it says done, your chip should also now have a green indicator light on it, and you can now exit out of this and disconnect everything. So we can now go back over to our Xbox. We're going to heat up our soldering iron, and we're now going to work on installing this chip. So now that we're back here, we're going to now prepare our chip. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of electrical tape, and we're going to get this thing taped down so we're going to have a nice stable surface to work with. So I'm going to just tape it down right here specifically because there's a few points that we might need to hit, and I'm going to annotate that as well. But as you can see, there's ground, 5 volt, C, E, F, and D, and we're going to just touch up on all of those right there. So you could use a little bit of flux here. It's not going to hurt, but most of the time I really don't need to use flux on these points, so I'm just going to be tinning these directly. So now at this point we have these all tinned up. Now, if you got your chip, you're going to need to do either one of two things. You should either, well, one, you're going to have some wires that came with it, like these ones right here, or you can go ahead and cut your own using something like 30 gauge wire right here. I'm going to use the ones that came with this chip, just because I want this to be as stock as possible. But what you're going to notice is that there is 4 of these small wires that are in the same length, and there's going to be 2 long wires. You want to solder the long wires to points D and C, and you want to solder the short wires to all the other points. So that's what we're going to do right here. Now, all these wires are also just a little bit too exposed for my liking, honestly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just trim the tips a little bit right here, just like that, like bring them down about halfway, like so. And there we go. And you might want to do that on both sides, but I just wanted to show you all me doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and solder these 6 wires in. So now that you have all the wires soldered in, at this point, if you're just doing a single NAND RGH install, you should be fine. However, we're going to be doing a Viper Dual NAND install, so if you're going to be doing the Viper portion of this, continue watching, but you can skip a little bit ahead if you're just doing a regular RGH single NAND install. So the reason why I'm citing this right now is because there's also going to be a few more points that we need to hit on here to prepare the chip. So we're going to need to hit a few points, which are honestly a little bit too small for my camera to pick up, it seems. So I'm going to have a visual diagram that Element from the mod shop has produced to show you all how to install the Viper chip. And I'm going to be showing, well, he's going to be showing the points right there. So we're going to go ahead and prepare them on this chip. But what you want to do is just follow along the video, check out the diagram as well too, and you're going to be preparing those points on the chips that we can solder to them later. So the problem is these are all extremely tiny resistors, so it looks like there's one up here, there's going to be one right here, there's going to be another one right here, one right here, and one right here. So there's 5 points that we're going to need to solder to eventually for the Viper. Again though, because we're going to have this chip in the Xbox, I'd rather do them right now rather than trying to solder this chip while it's in the console. So to prepare for this, you can go ahead and clean up these points if you really want to. Although this chip is brand new, I don't feel like we need to, but we can go ahead and do that. And what I will also do is for this job, I'm going to be using some flux right here. So you just want to dab your flux on all the points that you're going to be hitting. If you kind of want to just like drag it across like that, you could do that as well too. And then of course it would be good to clean this up later on, but for now, this is fine. So we now have it all fluxed up, and now I'm going to be soldering to those 5 points that are shown in the diagram. So as you can see, that was the first point, and what we want to do is we just want to dab each one with a tiny bit of solder and just stay on there for no more than 1 or 2 seconds. And I'm going to do that 4 more times on all the other points. So now that is complete. I've dabbed just a tiny bit of solder on all 5 of those points. So now this chip is ready for installation in the Xbox and eventually some wiring that we're going to be putting on here for the Viper. So we're going to put the wires on once we have the chip installed, but first we want to make sure that this console is booting up in the RGH portion of it properly. So let's go ahead and go back to our console, and you can go ahead and remove this. So coming back to our 360, this is where we're going to be putting the chip. We're going to want to sit it about right here. Seems comfortable enough. You want to kind of land up, with Southbridge, so it's right there with the lines, and I think this would normally be okay. You could even put it, like, I guess, a little bit down here, so all these points are kind of exposed in a way. Not all of them need to be, but I think somewhere around here is fine. One problem that you will run into is unless you change around these wires, your ground wire is going to be a little bit too short. So there's a few things we can do. One of them is we can kind of just move up the chip enough to the point where it's just like touching this AV board right there, and then we solder it to that. However, you can do that if you want to. I would personally feel more comfortable moving this back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to desolder this wire, and I'm actually going to cut a whole new wire using some 30 gauge wiring, so that way I can actually hit the AV board. So that's the only wire I'm going to recut here. Again, if you want to, you can move this around. You can solder it to another piece of metal on the board. I don't really know if it would be good to solder it to the heatsink. It'd probably be best to solder it, to one of these points. But either way, I'm going to be recutting this wire. But if you are dealing with just only these stock wires, you might just want to move this up enough so that you're still able to be flush with this hole right here, since we're going to be utilizing that for the console itself. So what you want to do at this point, and sorry I didn't fully film this, my camera was actually off at the time, I ended up taking the sticky stuff that came with the chip and I slapped it onto the back of the chip right there. And then with this, I just removed the other side, so now we have our adhesive working, and now we're going to fit this into the console itself. So I'm going to worry about that wire later. But what I'm going to do here is bring over the console, and I'm going to take our chip, kind of decide where we want to fit it. I think like right here would probably be fine. I think that's probably alright. And just gently press down on it. You don't really want to put a ton of effort into it, but just put a little bit so that it's not going to move around anywhere. And that's it. Our chip is now fitted and situated in the console. So now we can start soldering in all the wires. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, dab this with a little bit of solder, and I want to fix up that ground point. So I'm just going to grab the wire here easily enough, go over to this, and I'm going to desolder it. So you just want to heat this up. And there we go. So now that old wire is gone. Now I have already cut myself a new wire, and I'm going to be soldering this one in, and we're going to work on the ground point right here. So for this, I'm going to go ahead, just make sure the wire is straight first off, but line it up, solder it in, and there we go. We have our ground wire now soldered, our new one at least. And as for this right here, I'll show you all what the point is going to be that we're going to put it on. We can just put it on one of the legs, like right here on the AV port. Just anywhere. You can even put it right here. You can put it on the side. Just make sure it's touching metal somewhere. So we're just going to dab that point with solder and solder the ground wire to it, and that should be it. So for this right here, I'll just go ahead and use this leg. Again, just dab a bunch of solder to it. There we go. I'll then take our point. It's a little bit hard to do, but take that. This doesn't move around everywhere. Solder it. And you might want to make sure that it's not moving anywhere, but that's it. So there, we now have one of our points done. So that is the problematic ground point that we were having. Now let's go ahead and tackle the other points. So I'm going to tackle the points on the top of the board first, which are 5 volt, E, and F. And I'm going to have a diagram on screen showing where they're at. But the points are specifically right here on the board, right under these two NAND points. 5.5 is right there, and then you're going to go up, skip, and then go to the next one, and you're going to have on the left E and on the right F. So we need to tin these 3 points, which I'm going to do right here. Exact same process you do with the regular NAND points, so just rinse and repeat with that whole thing. So now that we have all those points right there, you just want to take the matching wires and solder them to those 3 points. So 5 volt on here goes to 5 volt, and then you're going to take the E wire and the F wires and solder them to E and F respectively. Make sure you solder the right points or else this is not going to work. So now those points are done. That's actually the easy part. We now need to take the next 2 points, which should be D and C. And we're going to come over here and you're going to find this hole right here. We need to feed these two wires through this hole, and we're going to solder to 2 points on the bottom of the motherboard. One of them is actually going to require us to at least partially remove our X clamp. So make sure you know how to do that. You might want to use like a flathead and be careful. Look it up online, of course, too. Now, I myself am going to be using the X clamp removal tool to make it easier, but we're going to go ahead and do that. So you just want to make sure you have C and D. We're going to feed each one through this hole right here, and we'll go to the bottom of the board. Okay, so when you flip this over, these specific points we're going to be hitting are right here. As you can see, you're just going to look for this line of dots, so to speak, and we're going to carefully remove the tool. So again, I'm using the removal tool. I'm just going to do that, bring it up, and depending on your proficiency, because there's one point that is directly under this, you might just want to remove the entire X clamp, and that's actually what I'm thinking of doing right here. So just carefully, like so. You want to make sure that this doesn't get, untensioned or anything. Now it's looking like I might not need to remove the whole thing, but there is going to be one point directly underneath here that I do need to get to. I have enough room where I feel comfortable. I could probably tin that up, solder to it, etc. But again, we just need to be really careful with it. So I'm going to put that down, make sure you have enough room on here. And now we're going to go ahead and start tinning these points, cleaning them and such. So I've just moved the camera to a point where you could actually see this, but there's going to be one point underneath right here. It's going to be this top one, and I'm going to have diagrams of all this, but this top one we're going to need to solder to, and then there's also going to be this point that we need to solder to. So I'm just going to clean the both of these. They're all nice and clean now. Then I'm going to go ahead and flux these 2 points. So just put a bit of flux right there. And let's put a little bit of flux underneath this too. Kind of want to put a little bit more on, which you can always do. That's fine. Once you have those all nice and fluxed up, we're now going to tin each of the points. Again, diagram's going to be on screen. And then we're going to be soldering the wires to them. So now we have both these points tinned, so the hard part's going to be figuring out which wire goes to what. So you kind of want to gently flip over the board, take note of which wire is which. In fact, you might just want to run one of these together, like one of these at a time, which might have been better in hindsight, but too late, we've already done this. What I'll do here, actually, I'll just go ahead, get rid of one of them, and I'll flip this over gently, and we can see. So this one wire is the C point, which I'm going to solder right there. That should be where it is in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and solder that point. And that's all we need to do for that. So now I'm going to grab the other wire and I'm going to solder it to the D point, which is underneath. You're going to have to be really careful there. So what I might actually do is I might just run it around this other way so these wires don't clash. So for this point, honestly, I'm going to record myself doing it. It's going to be such a hard time showing you all, but I promise the point is underneath there. So you might not see all that much on camera, but trust me, it's there. Just follow the diagram and you'll be fine. What I'm going to do for this one, though, I'm going to wrap it around this way and solder to that point. And that's it. We're done. So those points, although those are the hardest ones, they really don't take too much effort to solder. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace the X clamp properly. So let me get the X clamp tool. And it's already fine on 2 points, but for right here, I'm just going to bring it down. Stretch it out a bit, make sure it clamps on, and the same thing for this. And you want to make sure that this is not going to be obstructing your wires or anything. So that's why I'm doing it this way, just to make absolute sure that we will be fine. So there we go. The X clamps are back on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull these wires back a little bit. That should be okay. As you can see, it's not obstructing anything there. It's not nabbed onto by the X clamp. And we're now going to flip the board over again. Alright, so we now have our console right here. It is assembled, ready to go, powered up, and I have the HDMI hooked up to it. This right here, my Ethernet for my network, and I also have the power. Now, one thing actually did happen. When I tried this out the first time, it would not boot regardless. It kept flashing and flashing and flashing, and it wouldn't boot. Generally, what you want to do is if your system does not boot up within a minute, you want to try a different timing file. So that part of the tutorial where I showed you all how to program the chip, you would want to unplug your Xbox, program the chip with another timing file, and then plug it back in. So I actually did that, and I was able to get it to boot. What we're going to do is we're going to turn on the console right here, and we just need to wait for it to boot up. Now, if we don't have the best boot times right now, that's fine. We could spend some time optimizing it. And there we go. Took several tries, but it finally booted, so I'm going to try some different files. But right here, you should come to this screen called Zell Reloaded, and this is why I connected it to my network right here. So if you go ahead and wait on this, all of this comes up, and as you can see, it's now on the network. So if you are on the same network as your console, you can hit this IP on JRunner, which is what we're going to do. But if not, there's going to be the CPU key and the DVD key. We want to copy down the CPU key, so type that up somewhere, take a picture of it, type it into JRunner if you cannot get your Xbox on a hardline connection. But since we are networked in, I'll go ahead and show you all what to do here. So I now added the faceplate onto the console, so that way I can hit the eject button and the power button. But what I'm going to do is power on the console, and ideally it should boot pretty quick, but this console is not. So if you're having this issue, point is if your console's booting, that means your wiring is fine. You could change it around a little bit and that could improve boot times for sure, but this seems to be more of an issue with timing files, because as I said, one of the timing files, the first one I tried, did not work at all. The second one actually boots up, but it seems to really vary. Like right there, while I was talking, it decided to boot up. So, we got the green lights, it says Xbox 360 right there, and then once this comes up, there's no storage or memory attached to it, so it's not going to bring up anything crazy, but we now have the dashboard. That is exactly what we want. My rule of thumb is I normally like to get 5 good boots in a row, and if I can do that, that means the install is good. If not, I try and improve a little bit. You know, it might be some wiring, it might be the timing files, wherever it is. As I said, for this console, I think it's more of an issue of the timing files. That's what it seems like to me. But what I'm going to do is I'm also going to show you all that it is indeed exploited and not just a retail system. So the way you can now boot into Zell is you hit the eject button. And normally Zell boots up faster, so I wouldn't be too terribly surprised if it booted up super quick right here. And there we go, it booted up, so it took a few tries, but as you can see, we got the flashing green lights, and Zell shows up. So that means we now have a reset glitch hacked Trinity console with the X360 Run V3 installed. So at this point I'm going to do this off camera, I'm going to play around with the timing files, but really if you're here to RGH your system, you're done. That's all you need to do. Now, for this system, we do want to do the dual NAND solution. So, if you are here for that, let's go ahead and continue. Alright, so now if you're continuing with this tutorial, we're going to get to the fun part, which is the dual NAND chip right here. So, first off, you need to be on the bottom of the board. Most of the work is going to be on the bottom of our board right here. There's going to be a few things we're going to run over to the actual glitch chip itself, and then we're going to solder in a LED light as well. But what we're going to be doing is first we need to find where this thing goes. So you want to make sure you flip your board over, and then right down here, this will be near where the Wi-Fi board would be facing outwards. You're going to want to find this little space, and this PCB has been so well designed that it just fits in right there. And you want to make sure that you can line up, because we're going to solder in these 2 points right here. There's going to be about 6 other quick solder points we're going to solder here, and there's going to be 8 up top, and you want to make sure it matches with everything. So I'm going to have a diagram on screen as well that is going to show you this exactly, but we're going to get that all soldered in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this is perfectly fine right here, and then I'm going to just put down a strip of electrical tape so this thing doesn't move while we solder it. But actually, first, before we do that, what would be smart is to end up removing this right here, and I'm going to take some isopropyl alcohol, and I'm going to clean up all of the points. So I actually kind of forgot what exactly we're soldering to, but okay, it's these points right here, this point, and these. So those are all the points that we're going to be soldering, and they should all be very clean at this point. So there we go. Now once that dries up within a few seconds, we can then, right there, we're going to plop down our chip, and then we'll go ahead and tape it down. And I'm probably just going to tape it across the NAND itself right here. That big black chip is the NAND, so we'll go ahead and mess with that here in a bit. Alright, so the way we're going to be working on this, in case you've never worked on a quick solder board, is you still solder the point in there, but you know there's two layers right here. So you're kind of just almost gluing these two layers together, so to speak. And the way I did this was, you have these 8 points lined up right here. There's 4 points right here, a point right here, a point here, and then we're going to solder these two on the resistor. And there's this little tiny resistor right here, and I just kind of made sure it locked in place pretty well. Like, again, I'm very impressed at this PCB so far. So what we did was I just made sure it kind of locked in, everything lined up, taped it down so it's not going to move. And once we start soldering in points, nothing's really going to move, but you're going to want to be careful here. Because it's really easy to mess these up as well too, although they are still user-friendly, so to speak. So again, I'm going to have the diagram up on screen showing you what points to solder. I'm going to do my best to show you on here, but because this is so small, it might be a little bit difficult. So the first thing I want to do again is I'm going to take some flux, and I'm going to just rub it and kind of slab it across all of these points right here. I'm going to do the same thing on these. This guy. You really just want to almost lather the entire chip, but not really. And then you got those. And that's about it. I'll add a little bit more on there. But aside from that, I think we are good to go on this. So it does look like a little bit of a fluxy mess, but that's about to be expected. So we have all those done. What you could do is you could also quickly tin these points too. You could almost just kind of like really put a little bit of solder, like dab a little bit of solder to your tip and then just pop it in the hole and it will solder together. Most of the time that's how it works. But let's just go ahead and solder this up. Alright, so all this is done, and I'm actually very proud of my work, so to speak. Now, the best way I can kind of advise to do it, because it's been a while since I'd worked on one of these, but the way I do it is I take the soldering iron, and it could be clean or it could have a little bit of solder on it, and I just push it straight down, and then like straight down on the point, and then I kind of lean it into the point a little bit, kind of like if you're writing something with a pencil, for example. So like imagine, you know, like the very bottom of this motherboard, the actual Xbox 360 is the paper, and then you're just kind of like leaning it naturally because that's how I write. But you want to lean into the solder point on top. And then what I do is when I'm leaning the soldering iron just ever so gently like that, I just bring in the solder, kind of like I showed you all right there, dab it in, and what it does is then it ends up connecting the point on the top PCB to the bottom point, which is on the Xbox 360. And the result should be, you know, a nice, clean, kind of like, you know, circular type blob right there on each of these points. So we ended up doing, what, 8, 6 points, 2 more points right there. So 16 points for this chip alone, but the PCB is now actually installed. However, we're not completely done. There are a few wires that we're going to need to solder in right here. However, because this PCB has been installed, what I can do is I'm actually going to remove the electrical tape because we will no longer need this. So let me go ahead, take this off, and there we go. And as you can see, nothing moved around because the chip is nice and secure and that thing is not going anywhere. So we're good to go on that. So this chip did include wire with it. It's all right here. As you can see, it is very thin and this should be enough to get the job done. And I believe this is probably 30 gauge wire. So you're gonna need something like these these wire strippers that are really fine-tuned to do this. However, this is just more of a personal problem right here. I'm not really too big of a fan of this wire. I actually just bought a whole ton of 30 gauge wire that I like a lot more. It's more flexible and it's just higher quality. Not to say this is bad by any means. You could still use this and it would be fine. I just have some wire that I would prefer to use that's still 30 gauge. So even if this comes with it, you can still use it. I'm not going to, however. And instead, I'm going to be using the wire that I got here. I'll have a link down below to this as well too, but we're going to now be soldering many points together. So we're going to solder the dual NAND chip to a few points on the motherboard. We're going to solder it at one point on the RF board, and we're going to solder a few points to the actual glitch chip. Alright, so what I just did here, unfortunately I can't show you because my camera decided to cut out, but there are 3 points. They are these 3 points at the top of the board, which is RB, CE1, CE2. All 3 of those points we're going to be soldering wires to, and we're going to solder them to different points on the board and on the console here. So all I did was I just fluxed those 3 and put down 3, I dabbed a little bit of solder on each one and tinned each point that way. Really, because I didn't film it, you're not missing all too much, especially if you've gotten to this point, you should know how to do that easily. But we now have these 3 points and we're now going to start soldering them. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to solder RB, which we need to look for RB specifically. Now again, I'm going to have a diagram for this on screen, but there is this resistor right here, and to the right of that resistor there's a little tiny point outside of this line, and that one is RB. So we're going to solder to that by cleaning it. I'm going to flux it and then solder a wire from RB on here to that point on the motherboard. So next, just to knock these other 2 points out of the way so we're done with the PCB itself, we're going to solder to CE1 and CE2. Now we're going to have to solder to 2 points that are on the actual glitch chip itself. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up the wires and send them over, solder them and then send them through the hole right up here. Now, first of all, I have CE1, I've run it through, and I've trimmed it accordingly. Now, right here, it looks like that's the point. So we have, just going from up to down right here, the way it's looking on camera, we have RF pin 13, CE1, and CE2 that we've all already prepared for the chip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder in CE1. CE2 is going to be the exact same way, and then I'll also explain how the other ones go in. So the next point we're going to solder to is SMC reset, which you have your chip right here. You're going to come up and there's going to be these 2. These are the NAND points that we've been messing with actually. So the SMC reset, it is, let me see if I'll just go ahead and use this Q-tip. There's the white dot right there, and you're going to go over one, over another, and this one right here, I'm going to have a diagram of course, but this is the point that we're soldering to. Looks like we already have a little bit of solder on that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this point. Just the regular thing we do at this point now. I'm going to flux it up a tiny bit. That's about all we need. And I'm going to tin that point. And then we're going to solder in that wire. And I'm going to run the wire from here to Southbridge right in this hole, if you all can see that. Hopefully you can. But I'm going to run it into that hole. So then we can then solder it to the SMC reset point on the glitch chip. Okay, so I have my wire right here. I'm going to trim it accordingly, probably to about like that length or so. I think that should be fine. And it looks like the wire, well, the point that we're going to be soldering to is right there. So we've already tinned it since we did that when we prepared the chip, and I'm just going to solder into that. Alright, so for RF pin 13, we're going to come over right here. This is where the RF board is on the motherboard itself. And it is going to be, if you come and look at it this way, it's going to be this top point right here in the corner, the one that just on top of it, it says 13, that's it. It says 13, so pin 13 specifically. We're going to do the same thing there, where all I'm going to do is clean up that point. We're going to flux it and tin it, and then we're going to solder a wire in, and I'm going to run it back over to Southbridge, run it through this hole, and then we're going to wire that into the glitch chip. So I'm now going to solder this to RF pin 13, which is that final point, that final resistor right there. At least the one that we have to deal with on the board here. So again, this has already been prepared, and I'm just going to do a quick touch on that. Apologies if I can't do this the best way or show it the best way, but these are very tiny points. They'll be difficult to really show on camera here. Now we're going to need one more wire. This is the last one, so we don't have to flip over the board anymore, but it's going to be this point right here. There's going to be that resistor, and this is now going to be for the debug LED and NAND indicator. So what I will do here is I'm just going to solder that in, and then we'll go ahead and work on the LED. So now all the points on the chip itself, the ACE, are now done. We're now going to have to work on the LED right here, so our final point is going to be on the RF board itself. So you want to take your RF board right here, and we're just going to pinch like that and remove it so this is exposed and we can now work on this. Alright, so if anything, funny enough, this might be the part that intimidates me the most because I have not messed with LEDs in years, and on top of that, I have not done what we're about to do here. So first off, I'm going to be using my trusty X-Acto knife. I recommend you get the same thing or something similar. And we're now going to go over to the RF board. It's recommended to use this point right here. So we're going to need to scratch away a little bit. And there is going to be, I'm also going to be using tweezers for this. There's going to be this LED. Like, that is how small that thing is. So I'm going to try my best to show you all right here. But we're going to take that LED and we're going to solder the negative point over to that. And then we're going to solder the other end of that wire to the positive side right here. So first off, we need to expose a little bit of the negative polarity. So to do that, we're just going to scrape this away. And our goal here is to see the copper. Now right here, the way I'm feeling this, you really don't want to press down. You really do not want to apply pressure. Let the X-Acto knife do the work for you, and if it takes 2 minutes or 20 minutes, so be it, but you really don't want to destroy this thing from working. So I'm not sure how well you all can see this, but right here I am starting to see the bare copper. So I think what we can also do as well, if you want to see this easier, because there's going to be a little bit of dust that gathers. Also, don't be afraid of cleaning up this point right here as well too. So I can see that much better now, and you know what, I think that's more than enough at this point. So now this is what I'm going to do. I am going to solder. I'm going to go ahead, I'll actually tin this right now. I'll wait a little bit, but point is I'm going to tin that point, I'm going to tin it, and then I'm going to end up, well, I'm going to flux the point, tin it, then I'm going to solder the negative end of the LED, the cathode we have, to that. Now, I'm also going to attach a diagram here on the video that shows you the polarity of LEDs. So my package did come with 0603 SMD LEDs that you can install on this, one of the ones that will be included right here. So I think we're good on that, but I'll go ahead and show you all the rest of the process here when we work on this. So this right here is actually exactly what we're wanting. What I did was I got it soldered in. That's not touching the other LEDs, that's good. And what I'm going to do is just poke that a little bit on each side, and that thing's not moving. So we now have the negative point soldered in successfully. What we now need is we need our console. So I'm going to bring the console up here and we can finish the job. So now for this final piece, I'm also going to end up fluxing the other end of that LED right there. I'm going to then snip this a bit, just to expose the wire. There we go, that's more than enough. And we can now end up tinning this and soldering the final point to it. So for this, go in like that. There we go. And actually that shows me it works, because if you saw that, it lit up blue a tiny bit. So I'm now just gonna go right here, solder it in. And that's it. Guys, we are almost done. We've now finished, if everything works here properly, which we're going to test, we have now completed the physical install the physical install of this chip right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this up, show you all what's going on the TV here, and we'll give this all a shot. We are going to have to reflash our NANDs though, so that's why I told you all to make that initial backup just in case. But let's go ahead now. At this point, you can take your RF board, hook it up to your 360, and plug your 360 into HDMI and power, and let's also go over to our computer with JRunner, so you're going to want to hook up your NAND X as well. Alright, so at this point, as per Element's instructions, he says, after you have installed your Viper and the required wires, hold the sync button on the Xbox 360 to switch into the Viper NAND to write your newly created update flash.bin. Once done, switch back over to the 360 NAND and write your original NAND back to the console. So now we'll have dual NAND. So at this moment, my 360, the current NAND it is on, it is the onboard console NAND, and it is running the hacked XE build image. So what I'm going to do is hold down the console, and I have my NAND X and everything hooked up, but I'm going to hold down the sync button on the console to then switch over to our Viper NAND. So if done successfully, your blue LED or your indicator LED that you installed should flash, as well as the green LED on the 360 ACE. So now that we're in Viper NAND, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to our NAND X, make sure this is the update flash, remember that's the hacked NAND, and I'm going to then write NAND. So it's now writing, and we're just going to wait a couple minutes. Now that that is complete, we have written over our glitched NAND. However, our hacked NAND is on both of our NANDs. Right now we should be on the Viper, so what we need to do is hold down the sync button again and switch back into our 360 NAND. Now what we need to do is we need to go over to load source once you have switched NANDs to the retail side again. Go all the way over, and we are now going to need to find our, our original NAND dump. So the very first retail NAND dump we got, which should be NAND dump 1. You're going to punch that in. As you can see right there, confirm that is NAND dump 1, and then select write NAND. Now wait another couple minutes, and it's going to reflash the stock NAND over to the Xbox 360 console itself. Now that this is done, disconnect your NAND X from your computer and your Xbox, and we're now going to go back to the Xbox and see if what we have works properly. Alright everyone, so time to observe the fruits of our labor. You should now be at this point, this should be the final step. So what I've done is, right now this is in the Xbox 360 NAND mode, and I'm going to show you all how this works. To prove that we're in stock versus hacked modes, I'm going to be using the eject button. So as you can see, everything is hooked up. We got power to the board right there, and if I hit the eject button, It will flash a few times regardless, but this should come up. So we do have the nice green lights, and if we come right here, we don't have Zell come up, we have the Xbox 360 logo come up, and it should boot us into the dashboard. So this right here is our stock NAND that is on our actual console. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and I'll show you all how this works right here. It's quite easy to use. And when it comes to updating, you don't have to rip open your system or anything. You can just update it as normal. So for example, on the 360 side of things, on the retail side, you can just update it through Xbox Live, or you could update it through a USB drive. On the hacked retail side, so the XE build or the RGH side, you could just, create your new image in XE build and then flash it over using USB and Zell. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to hold down the sync button and watch this. So as you can see, you can't really see it right here, but there's supposed to be, the LED is supposed to have an indicator right there. You can't really see it through this, but you saw that the green LED right there blinked twice. So now what we're going to do is press the eject button, wait for this, boots up super fast. I swear the boot time's improved after I installed this chip. And if we wait, come on, there we go, Zell reloaded. So, as you can see, we have just flip-flops between the two NANDs right there. So we have our hacked side and we have our retail side. We're going to go ahead and turn the console off. But that is it at this point. Really, all you have to do now is you're going to have to, I'd highly recommend going in, cleaning up any type of flux. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to desolder all these wires as well to put the console back together. And I'll even show you all this if I can right here. Let me hold this down. Oh, it looks like the LED is not working. I swear it was working, but I'll probably have to just touch up on that with a little bit of solder. Point is, we have that working. So if that's not working or any other points aren't working, you might have to touch up on them. But again, we can prove that it works right here. So I hit eject. We should boot up into the retail side. It's booting up. And when we come right here, Xbox 360 logo. So that is it. That is the full tutorial, stock Trinity to dual NAND Trinity with stock NAND and a retail hack NAND with the Viper chip. Again, huge, absolutely huge shout out to Element over from the mod shop. I mean, without him, literally none of this would have been possible. He donated the hardware to me, but on top of that, he is actually the developer. In case I haven't mentioned it, he's the developer of the Viper chip. So, immaculate chip. I've been very impressed with this so far. Oh, there we go. We can see the LED indicator a little bit. But I've been very impressed with this thing so far, and definitely happy that we have this system. So, hopefully this helps you all out. If you thought this was a good tutorial, a like would very much be appreciated. If you want to check out all the stuff yourself, there's going to be links down below in the description where you could buy, check out everything, do whatever you want to. If you want to get this done to your system, I can highly recommend the mod shop himself. You can go to his website, get some service done on your own console. Or if this is too dicey for you, which I completely understand. I just went through this. It's not an easy thing. It's not super hard, but it's not super easy either. You can get your own pre-modified console from him as well, too. Prices vary on that. But anyways, if you go there, let him know that Mr. Mario sent you. I'm sure he would absolutely appreciate it. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone.